How's it going, you fantastically amazing people? I'm Jake the Ashen Hollow. In this video, we're gonna ponder on the curiosities that the Ringed City brought to my attention. Like my previous Encyclopedia of Curiosities video, we'll be covering some things that maybe aren't long enough to warrant a lore video of their own, or maybe things that don't have a whole lot of evidence to them, but are still curious and interesting nonetheless, and other things of that nature. So let's start with something I've gotten a ton of questions about regarding any info from the DLC, and that is, of course, Velka. Now, I didn't find anything specifically related to Velka, but I do have a little something to say about her, though it is mostly in passing as it's about another character, and be forewarned that it isn't as off the shelf as my other thoughts on Velka have been in the past. In fact, this one correlates right along with the most common theory out there about Velka, and that is that she is Gwen's wife or lover. This is mostly brought up because of Fillianore, Gwen's last-born daughter. The small envoy banner says, "The small banner used by envoys of Great Lord Gwen in the days of yore. Face the ringed cliff and hold the banner high to summon facilitators of transport. For the pygmies who took the Dark Soul, the Great Lord gifted the Ringed City, an isolated place at World's End, and his beloved youngest daughter, promising her that he would come for her when the day came." So certainly Gwen has a daughter in the Ringed City. And this probably shouldn't be news to anyone, but it's almost certainly Fillianore. Now I say almost certainly in the same regards that I say the Nameless King is almost certainly the firstborn. It's as close to a fact as you can get from the game without it outright stating it. Anywho, this is the theory I have about this whole circus we've got going on here. It certainly makes a ton of sense for Gwen and Velka to have hooked up or even been husband and wife. The only thing that slightly throws me off is I can't see the firstborn and Guinevere being her children. We certainly know that Gwen was a manipulative asshole, so this is how I see it. You know, in movies and television and books and shit, there's the story of the unpopular girl. She's shy, probably slightly attractive, and usually like goth or emo or some shit. Then you have the jock that simply just to do it asks her out or to prom, leads her on, and in the end it's just a big goof on her. I think this is the case between Velka and Gwen, and this movie ends much more like Carrie. Gwendolyn could also be Velka's child, but there isn't any reason to ponder on that for this theory. So Gwen is seeing the coming of the end of the Age of Fire, and the realization that humanity will rise and needs to strike some sort of deal with the Pygmy Lords. Give them a child to slumber for the sake of man. Sounds like a plan. Well, my firstborn and Guinevere are far too good for that shit. Gwendolyn... Nah, no, he's weird as shit and a probable furry. I need a new child to secretly give away. I also think it's important to note that I do believe that Gwen giving Fillianore to the Ringed City was done outside the knowledge of his people in order to maintain appearances and such. I'm sure you understand the reasoning behind that. Anyway, carrying on. This is where Velka comes in. She's quite a powerful being, has ties to humanity, great childbearing hips, and thicker than a bowl of oatmeal, exactly what Gwen is looking for. So he seduces Velka, she falls for the whole thing, is constantly writing about him in her diary, putting a blazer on a broom and dancing with it while she's supposed to be doing her chores, the whole 9 yards. Cue 9 months later, and boom, out pops a baby girl named Fillianore. Which, by the way, a meaning of the name Fillianore that I'm sure everyone is quite familiar with now is Daughter of the Sun. And I also learned when trading messages with Twitter user Quantum Alice that Fillianore can also be roughly translated to mean love of the dark, so that's pretty cool. So then Gwen snatches off the baby and gives it to the Ringed City, and of course marked it with pretty words, promising to come back to her blah blah blah, likely just more lies. And actually, no, she probably wasn't snatched right away as a baby. I imagine she would be at least a few years old. Now, in terms of Gwendolyn, I think when he was born, he was kind of hid away. We don't see any statues or anything of him like that. Plus, he is kind of a weirdo. But I think this served a purpose for Gwen. Gwendolyn may have been more well hidden away from the public than Fillianore was, if she was at all. I think there could have been a clever bait and switch here. Gwendolyn, we know, was raised as a daughter because of his affinity for the moon, but that purpose alone never made any sense to me. Moon is feminine, sun is masculine. Sure, that is an allegorical theme, but if for that reason alone, why isn't Guinevere raised as a son? I think the narrative just fits for Gwen's purposes. He trades off Fillianore, then he dresses up Gwendolyn like a girl, tells him it's 'cause of the moon and some shit, and then all of a sudden it's like his youngest daughter was there the whole time. In fact, in Dark Souls 1, Gwendolyn is specifically referenced as Lastborn, so that could be precisely Gwen's intentions here. Anyway, so like I said, this teenage drama flick ends more like Carrie because Velka, the goddess of sin, goes apeshit and starts judging the gods, goes on to mother the children who founded the Sable Church, the very church that directly opposes Gwen's ideas and fights against the Flame and the gods. Alright, on to the next curiosity. So if you played Dark Souls 2, you probably read in some descriptions about what I guess could be considered the love story of Alva and Zullie. Alva was a knight who was searching the lands for a cure for a sick saint, and Zullie was a witch who was determined to stop him, but in the end they both found new purpose for life in each other. It is really quite fucking beautiful in a world so dark. So we see this story rekindled, get it? In the Ringed City. We are invaded by Alva twice in the game, once outside Irithyll Dungeon and again in the Ringed City near the corpse in which we acquire Zullie's armor, which leads me to believe that that's her corpse and he's defending it even still. Then something dawned on me. The community has very often pondered on who the hell is Carla and where did she come from. I think she's Alva and Zullie's daughter. Let me explain why. So my first connection was how Alva invades to defend something he loves, example being Zullie's corpse, and then I wondered why he did it outside Irithyll Dungeon. I think he was searching for and protecting his daughter. Alva was originally called the Wayfarer when he was traveling the land searching for a cure, but that was long ago, and in the events of Dark Souls 3 were much further in the future, and he is now known as Seeker of the Spurned. Certainly that couldn't have anything to do with his quest to find a cure. That is well passed over with, and Seeker of the Spurned is about something specific. Let's read the description of Carla's ashes. The spurned child of the abyss never dies, but phases in and out of its fringes. Only there is no one to search for her any longer. Well, there's the answer to which spurned is being sought after. Alva is seeking Carla. That makes sense. It also makes sense that he invades us right outside the dungeon we find her in. It also says that there's no one to search for her, which may be true, and I think it's important to note that it's stating that it's a search for her, not a hunt. She's already in prison. I don't think that the Seeker of the Spurned is trying to find her for any kind of violent reasons. I think he's trying to find her because he wants to find her, perhaps to be reunited with his daughter and or protect her. So at the time we find Carla, Alva may be long dead, but we're still invaded because time is fucked up, which I do partially suspect has a lot to do with Fillianore, but that's a whole other can of worms to open in a different video. Essentially, Alva invades us as a means to keep us out of the prison. That makes the most sense, right? Right before we enter, there he is at the entrance, barring the passage, likely to keep Carla safe in the same way in whatever alternate timeline the Ringed City is in, he protects Zullie's corpse. Now that isn't enough evidence to prove that Carla is their child, but I think it's a safe assumption at least at this point, and I'm not even done yet. Carla is specifically a child of the Abyss, which is why she relates with the dark and is the only one to read his dark tomes. The Blindfold Mask we find in the Ringed City says, an eye-occluding mask of unknown origin, small cracks allow the wearer to see, strengthens dark attacks but also greatly increases damage sustained from dark. Well, I think we do know the origins of this mask that resonates with the dark. The original name of the mask was the Black Witch Domino Mask, and that was in Dark Souls 2. Want to know whose it was? If you guessed Zullie the Witch, then congratulations. You've won a fraction of a timeshare located in the beautiful city of Detroit. Be sure to bring protection. Anyways, so Zullie was probably quite tied to the dark. She is called the Black Witch, by the way. So if she mothered Carla, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to see how she could be a child of the Abyss. Then the last piece of small evidence is that of the witch's hat. The Black Witch hat reads, the pointed hat is a symbol of heretical magical crafts, and Zullie wore hers with an unspoken but deep sense of pride. And Carla's pointed hat reads, a pointed hat is the signature of a heretical sorceress. Carla, however, always kept it close. So both of them are fond of their hats for whatever reason, and I think that reason may be passed down from mother to daughter. Or maybe now that Carla is all alone, it brings her comfort to keep it close, as it was something her mother took great pride in. And I do think it's specific to Zullie and Carla. We don't see any other witches giving a shit about their hats anywhere else in the game. I did want to find a way to tie Zullie and Carla to Beatrice, because it just seems like a match made in heaven since she was a witch who could traverse the abyss, but as much as it could make sense that she's related as well, there's simply nothing to actually back up the claim. Alright, on to the last curiosity for this video, and that is that I think Gael and Gwen are nearly exact counterparts to each other, and it's highly symbolic of the series as a whole, and I think that's really neat. Let's first read a line from two things we get from Gael, the blood of the Dark Soul and Gael's soul itself. They say, "The red-hooded wandering slave knight Gael sought the blood of the Dark Soul as pigment for the painted world. But Gael knew he was no champion, and the Dark Soul would likely ruin him, and that he had little hope of a safe return. And that, when Gael came upon the Pygmy Lords, he discovered that their blood had long ago dried, and so consumed the Dark Soul." A lot of people are of the assumption that Gael drank the blood for power because he was corrupted, but I don't think that was the case. He was certainly corrupted by the Dark Soul, but he knew that it would ruin him. He knew he wasn't coming back, but by the time he arrived, the blood was dried up, and therefore a pigment could not be made, unless of course the Dark Soul was pouring through his veins, as his blood had not yet dried. Gael led us through the Ring City, and I think it was specifically so that we could find him and that we could kill him. It was all that was left he could hope to do, to willingly become corrupted by the Dark Soul and to sacrifice himself so that his blood could produce the proper pigment. So he didn't do it for power. Sure, when we finally get to him, he's power hungry, but that's simply because of the corruption. But I think he knew the whole time that he was leading us to him because we were powerful enough to defeat him, even with the blood of the Dark Soul. And that is not unlike the sacrifice Gwen made. At the end of his rope, all other options extinguished, so he made himself a sacrifice to prolong the world and do what he thought was right. We also fight Gwen through who his sacrifice is a shell of the person he was, and nowhere near as powerful as we can assume he was in his prime. Yet in the midst of Gael's sacrifice, he's become more powerful than he had ever been. An infinite amount of songs have been sung of Gwen and his mighty sacrifice, yet no one will sing of Gael and what he has done. They both have white beards, and their names start with G. But no, seriously, I think the symbology here is quite poetic and hauntingly beautiful, if you will, that these two are exact counterparts to each other. Well, that wraps up things for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. I always try my best to get back to people there, but sometimes I just get overflown. But if you want to reach me much more easily, join the Discord server. The link is in the description, as well as the links to my Twitter if you want constant updates on all the things going on, or to my Patreon if you've ever wanted to support me a step further, and the links to all the people, places, and things who help make my channel and videos possible and what they are. So thanks again for watching, everyone. Have a blessed day. Until next time.